August 4th, 1962, just after midnight. A telephone rang inside a Brentwood home, and by morning, Marilyn Monroe was dead. The call, the timing, and the silence that followed would never be fully explained. For decades, the world has been fed a clean version of that night. Pills, depression, tragedy, case closed. But behind the polished narrative is a narrow window of hours that Hollywood never truly reconciled. A window filled with unanswered calls, erased notes, and a decision made quietly, long before the body was found. This story is not about Marilyn Monroe, the icon. The audience already knows her face, her voice, her legend. This is about Marilyn Monroe in her final stretch, and the moment when silence became more powerful than truth. What we will return to later is not how she died, but why so many people agreed to stop asking questions. In the summer of 1962, Marilyn's public image was unraveling. Her contract with Fox was strained, her attendance on set was inconsistent, her health was fragile. Reports suggest she was being monitored closely by doctors, assistants, and studio intermediaries. What mattered was not just her condition, but what she knew and what she was saying out loud. Privately, Marilyn had been talking to friends, to therapists, to people she trusted enough to vent. She spoke about feeling used. She spoke about promises made to her that were quietly withdrawn. She spoke about powerful men who stopped returning calls once she stopped being convenient. This is where the story narrows. In late July, Marilyn was dismissed from a major studio production, officially for medical reasons. Unofficially, reports suggest tempers flared behind closed doors. She was no longer just a liability, she was unpredictable, and unpredictability in Hollywood is dangerous. Here's the first uncomfortable question. If Marilyn was spiraling, why was she left alone that night? Her housekeeper would later say she noticed something was wrong before midnight. Lights were on, the bedroom door was locked. Marilyn wasn't responding, and yet the first calls were not to emergency services. They were to people with influence. That decision changed everything. At some point during the night, Marilyn is believed to have made or received phone calls. This is not speculation pulled from tabloids. Multiple accounts reference frantic late-night conversations. But the phone records, the one concrete way to verify those claims, were never made public in full. Some were missing, others were allegedly destroyed. Unconfirmed reports suggest one call in particular caused alarm. A call that implied Marilyn felt betrayed, abandoned, and angry enough to talk. If that's true, the risk wasn't her mental health. The risk was her voice. I'll pause here to say this clearly. There is no verified evidence proving Marilyn Monroe was silenced, but there is also no clean explanation for why the aftermath was handled the way it was. Because once her body was discovered, the machinery moved fast. Authorities arrived, statements were taken, a narrative was formed, and just as quickly, doors closed. Witnesses adjusted timelines, accounts conflicted. Some details were walked back, others were never followed up on at all. One doctor present that night would later change parts of his story. Another key figure left town soon after. The housekeeper's timeline raised questions that were never fully addressed, and yet the official conclusion remained untouched. Here's where pressure comes in. Marilyn Monroe was not just a person, she was an asset, a brand, a symbol tied to studios, sponsors, and a carefully protected fantasy. A messy, unresolved death threatened that fantasy. Worse, it threatened to drag powerful institutions into public scrutiny. Hollywood has always known how to manage a crisis. Sometimes that means clarifying the truth. Other times it means containing it. This was containment. Within days, the public conversation was steered towards sympathy and closure. Grief replaced curiosity. Any suggestion of inconsistencies was labeled cruel or conspiratorial. The message was clear. Let her rest. Stop digging. But here's the second question that refuses to disappear. Why was the evidence trail so thin for someone so famous? Marilyn's personal notes were reportedly removed from her home. Her diaries, if they existed, were never entered into evidence. Her phone activity was summarized, not examined. Her locked bedroom became a symbol, but also a barrier. What happened before the door was forced open mattered more than what was found inside. There is a moment investigators often focus on but rarely emphasize publicly: the time gap. The stretch of hours where Marilyn was believed to be alive, distressed, and alone, yet no emergency response was triggered. That gap is the mystery. Some have argued it was negligence, others say it was confusion. Still others believe it was intentional delay. No conclusion has ever been proven, but the consequence is undeniable. Once enough time passed, certainty disappeared. I find it hard to believe that with this many professionals involved, no one thought to call for help sooner. That's not an accusation, it's an observation. After her death, reputations were protected. Studios issued statements, associates distanced themselves. Conversations that once happened freely were suddenly remembered differently. Silence wasn't just chosen, it was coordinated. Marilyn became frozen in time, the laughing blonde, the tragic star, the woman who couldn't be saved, and the questions she raised while alive were buried with her. In the years that followed, anyone who challenged the official story was dismissed. Journalists were warned off, sources retracted. The idea that there could be more to the story was framed as disrespectful. That framing worked, but look at what changed afterward. Hollywood quietly adjusted how it handled vulnerable stars. Contracts included tighter controls, publicists gained more authority, doctors were placed closer to the studio orbit. Marilyn's death wasn't just mourned, it was studied. Her silence became instructional. Another micro-question emerges here. If her death was truly simple, why did it reshape industry behavior so quickly? The answer may not be sinister, it may simply be pragmatic, but pragmatism can still erase truth. Marilyn Monroe died at 36, but the version of Marilyn that lived on was carefully edited. Her anger softened, her intelligence minimized, her final weeks compressed into a narrative of inevitability. The night of August 4th was treated as an ending. In reality, it was a cutoff. Unconfirmed accounts suggest Marilyn had planned to make changes, to speak differently, to step away. Whether those plans were real or imagined, they created anxiety among people used to controlling outcomes, and control, once lost, is rarely forgiven. As years passed, those closest to the night carried the weight differently. Some stayed silent, some contradicted themselves, some refused interviews altogether. Silence in this case wasn't empty, it was heavy. There's a quiet cruelty in that. Marilyn spent much of her life being talked over, spoken for, and interpreted. In death, the same thing happened again. We're left with fragments, a ringing phone, a locked door, a delayed call, a missing record. None of it proves wrongdoing, all of it proves discomfort. Hollywood prefers clean stories. This one never was. So here we are, more than 60 years later, still circling the same unanswered moment. Not because we want scandal, but because closure was declared before the questions were finished. Marilyn Monroe didn't just disappear that night, her agency did. If you believe stories like this deserve careful examination, not sensationalism, support the channel by liking and subscribing to Hollywood Unsealed. Share this documentary with someone who still believes unanswered questions matter. And tell us in the comments, what do you think mattered more that night, what Marilyn did, or what Hollywood chose not to do afterward?